right, we're a little bit late. Passionate debate between co-teachers.
And I was wrong, so.
No, you're not. No, up until, never mind. Okay, so we're going to be in Exodus chapter 2. If you have your Bible, turn there, Exodus chapter 2. And looking forward to hopefully a really good discussion today. And then we're going to introduce, I guess, one of the more central characters of all the Hebrew story when you think about it. Moses is just a fascinating character, and the more you dig into it, I think the more that's there. It's kind of funny because when we started this study and we looked at they only had 13 lessons and maybe a preview. They've only got like 12 episodes divided up in the movie, and so you're like, I don't know how we're going to do this. And then when you get into the actual material,
There's a lot of material.
I don't know how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Like it's on the other end of the spectrum. So look forward to today's discussion. Let's have a prayer. Jonathan, if you have a mic, go ahead and lead us in prayer, and then we'll jump into the video and then discussion.
Our Father in heaven, as we've gathered this morning to study about you and your word and you and your people, we pray that you'll direct our hearts this morning. Help us to see your plan and your love and your care for your people, and take from the material and take from this lesson and from your word the lessons that we need, the lessons that apply for us. And we thank you, Lord, that in all circumstances you deliver us and you care for us, and that you always have a plan. Please watch over us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
All right, so Peyton, if you'll click the link and put that on full screen, we'll watch that. Sam, you can turn the lights off there for us. And hopefully this will all work. The sound works today, and watch the internet be down for some reason.
About 180 miles northeast of Cairo is the small Muslim village of Ezbet Rushdi, known as Tel El Daba. The fields outside of Ezbet Rushdi were first excavated in 1885 by Swiss archaeologist and biblical scholar Henry Edouard Neville, and the site has been the source of multiple digs and just as many opinions as to whether this is the ancient city of Avaris.
If you go to the very end, Peyton, you can click the next video, I think, and that will be it. All the way to the end. Look for 3 out of 12. That one. There you go.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on...
How interesting that the video for Egypt is oil. So, here we go.
Our team had now been in country for 2 days, and the jet lag was really setting in. We found exactly what we needed along the shores of the Nile River. One? Yeah? Yeah? How long have you been doing this job?
52 years.
52?
Yeah, 52 years.
Wow. Do you work here every day, or are you at different places?
تشتغل هنا كل يوم ولا في مكان تاني؟
لا هنا.
Yeah, this is the spot.
This is the spot.
52 هنا 52.
Yeah, from 1955.
1955.
النيل حلو.
The Nile is beautiful.
Yeah.
مرسى عمار.
I asked him why the Nile River is important for
النيل.
Yes.
النيل روحنا. النيل ده روحنا.
Oh, it's your source. Soul. It's your soul.
Yeah.
النيل ده
Yes.
روحنا احنا.
Yeah, the soul of the Egyptians.
Yes.
حياة.
It's the life.
Life.
Yeah.
Ah, very good.
The Nile means life for Egyptians.
Yes.
He can fast, but he wants to drink from the Nile.
Oh, so even when he doesn't eat food,
Yeah.
he still wants water from the Nile.
Yeah.
مفيش زيت فيه.
Yeah. If we don't have the Nile, you will not have the coffee.
Ah, I see.
فين؟
So if you do not have the Nile, you would not have anything.
Yeah.
It is good. Yeah. Will you be blessed? Thank you.
So the king determined to put an end to their strength and ordered that any son born to the Hebrews should be cast into the Nile and drowned. Now a Hebrew from the house of Levi went and took a wife, and they had a son, a boy beautiful in God's sight. When the mother could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes, and she placed the child in it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister Miriam watched from a distance. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and she saw the basket among the reeds. When she opened it, she saw the child crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." And he became her son. She named him Moses, because, she said, I drew him out of the water.
The longest river in the world, the Nile reaches from deep in the deserts of the Sahara all the way to the lush green delta that empties into the Mediterranean Sea. Cutting through the heart of Cairo, this fluid highway isn't just a source of water. It's seen as the lifeblood for the Egyptian people. Not much has changed over 4 millennia. Plenty of people make their livelihood here, including this man, who has agreed to take us out on the river.
Can I come aboard?
You're welcome.
Thank you. I am Jeremy.
You're welcome, Mr. Jeremy. You're welcome.
And what is your name?
Bazid.
Bazid?
From Aswan.
Nice to meet you.
Egypt. You're welcome, Jeremy.
How long have you been working on the Nile?
28 years.
So most of your life you've been working on the water?
Yes, yes.
What do you know about the beginning of Moses' life?
أيوة صح طبعا حدثت صح في النيل.
Yeah, we believe that this story happened together.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too. How important is the Nile River to Egypt?
المصريين عايشين عشاك النيل، من غير نيل ما فيش حياة.
Can you tell me what the Nile meant to the ancient Egyptians?
تحول مسار النيل كان جنب الأهرامات على طول، بس تحول مساره تحول على هنا.
Yeah, he said all the Egyptians from the region live beside the Nile River, from Aswan to Cairo to the sea. Also, the material and the rocks that built the pyramids was taken from Aswan on boats on the Nile River.
Has your family been doing work on the Nile for many generations?
Yes, my grandfather all work in Nile.
The Nile is the life of Egypt.
Yes.
But it's very personal for you. It is life for you and your family.
Yes, also.
I mean, this is just the center of so much Egyptian history. Families from Egypt would have called this home. It would have been their life source.
The Nile River is the Nile River still. It may have changed a little bit, but we're on living history almost. And it's just so peaceful and serene, and you get to experience it this way in a way that you don't with walking amongst ruins or broken things.
It's living.
Right. That's amazing. And the feeling that I get being on the water here is really similar to the feeling that I get when I go to like the Sea of Galilee and you get on the boat there and it's still the Sea of Galilee. And then being out on the water, it pushes you away from a lot of the hustle and bustle of the city.
And there's a lot of that. I kind of imagine what it would have been like for Egyptians, pharaohs, to bring their parties out on the Nile
Which
River
they did.
to celebrate their prosperity, their place in Egypt, but then to bring doom on a Hebrew people.
So it's interesting, the Nile was used by Pharaoh as his last resort to try to reduce the population size of the Israelites in bondage. So they were bringing them to the river and drowning them. And Moses' family tries to keep him alive and hide him for a period of months until he gets too big to do that. And they bring him to the river and they do the best that they can do, which is put him in a basket and entrust him to God, not knowing what was going to happen. The faith of those midwives is they tried to find a way to preserve the life of infants, and the faith of his parents. His parents are mentioned in Hebrews 11 because of the faith that they had and what they saw in Moses. They saw something in him, and instead of doing what they were supposed to do, which would have cost them their lives, they risked their lives to save his. And all of that took place right around here. And for Moses in here.
And this became a turning moment. You know, the drama of the nation becomes the drama of this one person, this one child, and God's going to use him, and the story moves forward.
Pretty good video, I think, with especially the commentary on there. I'm going to just start off real quick with it's kind of a transition from last week, but what was life like in Goshen for the Israelites? Thoughts? What? Win? I mean, we could say overall. I mean, I think you could say if you separate. Okay, for that argument. Separate the slavery, the bondage. What was life like in Goshen? Yeah. Yeah, it was a good place. So good, and we won't read these texts, but when they leave, and there's just two of them, but there's more. They reflect on the good parts of Goshen. They reflect on, hey, back in Goshen we had. You remember the one with cucumbers and leeks and melons, and we had food, and we had a good life there. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that it was overall really good for the Israelites, minus the oppression and the suffering of slavery and what we're going to talk about today. And I think that just needs to be pointed out because, as we said on Wednesday night, God really uses their bondage to force them out of the land of Goshen. And once that bondage, and I think that's part of what you see, is once that bondage has been taken away and they're forced out, they want to go back because it was a better land to live in than the wilderness for sure.
For sure.
And probably in a lot of their minds, I would think the reasoning is, well, we can go back now because Pharaoh's lost all that. He knows he can't touch us. Our God's greater. We could go back. I'm sure that's part of the reasoning in their mind. But that wasn't God's plan. And but overall, life was great. And then you have this oppression, which we've talked about last week of the slavery and bondage. But this week, what takes the focal point is this command to kill the newborn males. That part of what Pharaoh wants to do is he wants to not only oppress the current generation old enough to fight, but he wants to prevent them from building up another generation of people. And a generation that will be even larger, because you would assume what happens with families is, especially at this time, right, where there's not as much, birth control and those kind of things.
Not much going on.
Yeah, that each generation gets larger. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, you've got to figure out a way to stop this group of people living in your land that you intend to keep living there, because you're being blessed. The other side of this, I think, is that they're a blessing to Egypt. Don't forget that. And so what Pharaoh would ultimately like to do is to keep them in Egypt, but suppress them and kind of force them to almost curtail their growth as a population.
Sure. And I think maybe you'll get to this, but I mean, what a great way for God to use Pharaoh. Again, he's trying to make them dislike Egypt and get away from Egypt. And I mean, I was kind of thinking about this when I saw your slides. I mean, a lot of us can tolerate maybe slavery and bondage to a certain extent, but to make a mother hate a country, kill her baby, right? Yeah. Right? When he starts making them sacrifice their males, those women especially, and I mean, and dads too, but I mean, that just destroys the the heart of parents right there. And so God used Pharaoh to want to make this decision so that they would want to get out of Egypt even more.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of what's on the screen is really, and I compared it, I think last week, to the tongues in Genesis 11 with the tower, and over in Acts, the persecution of the church that forces the dispersion out of Jerusalem in Acts 8-9 in that area. And so, we see God working in these ways to force dispersion.
Yep.
And in all three of these cases, what God has in mind, and especially in Genesis 11 and Acts, is the idea of being fruitful and multiplying, going out to the earth. Here what it is the promised land, being fruitful, multiply, and fill the land that I'm going to give to you, and really ultimately fulfill the promises of Genesis 12:1-3 of the family of Abraham is what. Mm-hmm. And so God is working in ways, and we talked about how he works in ways we don't understand, in ways that seem odd and strange and upside down even, because who would choose to persecute your own people in order to deliver them? That just seems backwards. But that's what God does. And as you said, and not just, by the way, what we see in the Hebrew women especially, they you have another story here where women are lifted a little bit above the men, because what you have here is you don't have the men mentioning anything about the birth of these males. It's the Hebrew midwives that step up, and they put their lives at risk. And I think sometimes we overlook that. I mean, they straight lie, essentially a lie to God, mm-hmm. or not to God, to Pharaoh, in order to do what God wants. And I don't want to get into the thing of ethical morality and lying. It's what they did, okay?
Right.
And say that they're born early, and and so then what he wants them to do then is just throw them in the Nile. And imagine that kind of imagery. You have there was a time, by the way, in modern China that once you had a child, you weren't allowed to have another child.
Right.
And it was mandated abortion, for lack of a better term. And that's part of also why Chinese orphanages are overflowing in a lot of ways. So this, as immoral and unethical and shocking as this is, there are parallels to this somewhat today for different reasons, but same kind of restrictions and guidance. I thought this kind of quote did a good job of illustrating this. When Amram and Jochebed found they were expecting a child, how the walls must have closed in on them. A boy was born, and now hope might have been choked out by the reality of their bondage. Danger wasn't merely a possibility. Death was surely an inevitability. It's a typo on my part. But death is an inevitability here with Moses. He's going to die. And this is kind of what we were talking about a little bit, but in Exodus 2, this whole story is about this essentially male infant genocide, for lack of a better term, is what it is. You select a whole group of people. If they're born a certain gender and sexuality, and they're from that nationality, they're killed. Period.
Thrown in the river. Yep.
No questions asked. But his parents do something different. And, I'll let you talk, Jared. You kind of looked this up, and like you said, they're probably not the only ones.
Probably not. I mean, and that's, I sometimes speculate outside of what the scriptures, so this is all outside of scriptures. But I just felt like, could they have been the only parents that tried to hide their baby? I just think so many mothers would have tried to hide their baby. And I thought about the birthing maids, and how I felt like there was a whole Underground Railroad type of thing where the Hebrew people just helped each other hide their babies. I just can't imagine that every mom was taking their newborn to Pharaoh's palace and just dropping them on the doorstep. I just feel like there had to have been women that were rebelling and refusing to do this. But we only have the account of Moses. We only have his mother, so we don't know for sure. It's pure speculation, obviously.
Yeah, and let's talk about why that is, because it's alluded to in the video. We saw this in Genesis. In Genesis, we saw that, you start taking the story for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then you get to Jacob's 12 sons, and the focus of the story completely changes. You no longer follow the story of the promised child. Like there's the Judah Tamar story, but outside of that, there's not really that much. But you have what we call the Joseph arc that just takes over the end of Genesis. And Joseph is not the child of promise. And if you were to write that story, thinking about it from the historical aspect of just the genealogy of Israel and the story of what's going to happen, and even the bloodline of the Messiah, you would make that about the Judah ark. But that's not what Moses does. He makes it about Joseph, because Joseph is the deliverer in the story. And that's why he takes over, that he delivers them from famine and from death. Moses becomes a Moses ark. And in the background of this arc of the story of Moses is the people of Israel, right? But Moses is going to dominate, 4/5 of the Torah, essentially. He's the lawgiver, he's the prophet, he's the leader. And so what we have here is this focus that begins on him. And it's going to stay on him. All of the stories in the rest of the Pentateuch revolve around this one character. And so it's important to kind of see that. So that's why we focus on that. Were there other young males that survived? I'm sure there were. I will tell you, you might go, well, what about Aaron? Aaron is the older brother. Aaron's the oldest. Moses is the younger brother. So Aaron would have been born before this edict, which explains Aaron's...
Well, also, and I don't know how long this decree was in place, but
that's the other question.
When Moses leaves for Miriam and then comes back 40 years later, when he eventually leads them out, there's 615,000 fighting men.
Yeah, but in numbers, when we get,
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like somewhere along the way there were some boys being not killed, right? That were growing up to become fighters.
Very possible. Yeah, absolutely. We don't know how long the edict.
We
lasts.
don't, and that's a lot of speculation. Make sure that's clear. That's not in the scriptures.
Because here's the other part about this is, I wonder at some point what they did, because if you kill out all the males for 40 years, who's making the bricks at that point too? So I think it would probably be a fallacy on our part to assume that entire 40 years they're killing all the Hebrew children. This seems to be more like in the days of Jesus, where it's for a period of time they did this more than anything.
And it gives Moses a lot of street cred, I think.
Yeah.
Just for lack of a better word for it.
Yeah. Maybe. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah. So the book points this out, which is really interesting. The boy was good. That's the terminology, or was fine, or I will tell you that it talked about this word, and one of the things is, this is go back to the last quarter. This is my word graph, and I'm not going to show you a breakdown because this word is used 484 times, and every color on that color wheel is a different translated word in English from this word in Hebrew, which means even the words you see up there aren't all the words, in other words. It's a common word. It's a very used word. But what is interesting is it is translated good in Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3. It takes on a really important role there. Everything that God sees that is good, same word. Also at the same time in Genesis 3:6, when she sees that the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is good, same word. So it's a common word. It's an interesting word to see kind of pop up and the connections that are there. And at the same time, this is really probably the idea is that they saw something in him. I think that's the idea here. Does that mean, or should we assume that means that they know who Moses is going to be? And that's part of our discussion earlier. And my answer to that is absolutely not. Like, I don't think that because of this one usage of a word used almost 500 times in the Hebrew Bible, we should assume, they knew this was going to be a redeemer. What I think it more along the lines is what Jared said. This is their child. He's a beautiful child. Yes, there's a law, but at the same time, they're willing to risk their own personal life, just like the Hebrew midwives, and risk his life on the chance that he might survive. And I do think there is a sense of faith in that. I think there's a sense of faith, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But I don't think that means they understand everything.
No, I don't think so.
And that's the major thing here. It was mentioned, and this could you peek at? Hebrews 11 credits them for their faith. In Hebrews 11 there, and in verse 23, it says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. And so that verse, by the way, all of those actions, Moses' faith had nothing to do with, right? That's his parents' faith. And in that sense, I do think, and this is what the discussion was between Jared and I since early this morning in text, that Abraham, Jared's like, it's not the same faith as Abraham. And I would agree with that. It's not the same, because as you pointed out, there's a lot more to Abraham's faith.
I think so.
You want to speak to that, or?
Well, I mean, like I was telling you, I think Abraham had already been promised that, he had already received the promises that the nation's coming from him, that the nation's going to come through Isaac. And so he didn't know what was going to happen after God told him to offer Isaac.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to second guess the story, but he went up on that mountain knowing that God had a plan for Isaac.
And in Hebrews 11, it says that plan was that he thought God would raise him from the dead.
Right. So he knew something. God had a plan for Isaac. As far as I know, Jochebed and Amram had no providence from God. They did not know there was a plan for Moses. Their baby was just beautiful and good to them, and they didn't want to turn him over to Pharaoh. But now I will say, you see the providence and the wisdom of God and obviously picking his parents, just like you do when he picked Mary and Joseph. Like, he knew that Jochebed and Amram were going to do the right thing, that they were going to raise him up in the Hebrew way once she got the opportunity to raise him up in the Hebrew way. But I just don't know if, I hate to take away, and Hebrews does say they had great faith, but I feel like also any mom would have done the same thing for their kid. I think any mom would have tried to save their kid.
Okay. Yeah. We got a mic coming.
All right, I'm going to hear. My opinion has to do with faith in Jehovah versus faith in other gods of Egypt. Okay.
Right.
The reason that I believe that Moses was chosen, part of the reason was because of his parents. His parents were faithful to Jehovah. That's why he's listed. Jochebed and Amram are listed here because they were faithful. Why did Moses recognize Jehovah God in the burning bush? Because, obviously he was told, "I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Yep. But he knew who that was. How did he know that? He knew that because of his parents. His parents weren't worshipers of the gods of Egypt. His parents were worshipers of Jehovah, and because of that, I think it's some impact that that is part of the reason that Moses was chosen. His parents were faithful, and because of that faith, they were driven to obey the laws of God versus the laws of man. And ultimately, regardless of whatever talents, abilities, skills we've been given in life, we're all given that choice. We're all given the choice to obey the laws of God, the laws of Jehovah, rather than the laws of man.
Yep.
And they were faithful to that, and because of that, they're noted.
Yeah, I think the way that it's similar to Abraham is both stories involve potential loss of a child. And in both stories, here's the core foundational principle. Both of them entrust God to take care of the child in some way, or they put their trust in God. I don't think that Amram and Jochebed float him down the river thinking he's going to float endlessly, but they put him in God's hands by doing that. They release control, and they're hoping that something will happen. And other people might have done that, and things similar might have happened.
Nothing's recorded.
We don't know. Nothing's recorded because this is the Moses Ark for a reason. Okay, that's why it's following this, and they're not going to be the same, because as I told Jared, I think one of the things to point out is Abraham wasn't asked to do what he did in Genesis 22 till a couple of decades after he was called in Genesis 12. And in a lot of ways, what you see in Abraham is somebody who probably didn't have the faith to do what he did in Genesis 22 and Genesis 13, for instance. He does a lot of good things. He does a lot. Abraham's story is up and down and trust God and doesn't trust God and all of these kind of things. And what is remarkable is that we do see and we can infer a lot about their faith, but there is no promise for Moses. This is a blind faith, whereas I think Abraham had a lot more information to go off of.
True.
Both of these stories, and the reason they're similar, is they are remarkable in different ways, but similar, that they involve their children, and they ultimately are just entrusting God to provide for their children. And that's how they're similar. They're not, when we make these connections, Wednesday night, we're going to make a lot of connections, hopefully, between Moses and Jesus. And there's going to be a lot of parallels that are just direct. I mean, extremely direct. This isn't the same kind of thing, but they are similar. And I think we should see the similarities. And Hebrews 11 both recognizes all of these individuals for their amazing faith. And there is something to that we have to acknowledge that. And I do think that they stand out among their generation. Not necessarily because they're the only ones, quote unquote, to try to save their child, but because of their character and their faith and the way God chooses them. That's why they stand out, would be the best way. Eric, get your hand up.
I was just, no, I don't.
Okay.
And just another example of, and you've already touched on it, of a woman rising up. Because the story here, I mean, it's she that does all this. She puts him in the river. She's the one, obviously, that gets to go to Pharaoh's palace and raise him.
She's the one that raises him.
She raises him to know Jehovah. So dad kind of disappears here, but mom is the one who really is responsible.
Dad does not disappear.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm going to refer back to Exodus 3, verse 5. Do not come closer. Remove the sandals
You're right.
from your feet. For the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he continued, I am the God of your father. That's Amram, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Daddy doesn't disappear.
He doesn't.
He's not mentioned.
He's not mentioned. You're right. Thank you.
Well, here's the only thing I will say that it makes all that. We don't know what Amram was capable of doing. And here's what I mean, is the reason why Jochebed is allowed to do what she does is she essentially becomes Moses' nanny.
Yeah, she does.
And Jochebed's the nanny. Amram is not allowed in that capacity.
Right.
And I don't think that Moses lived at their house. I think that she went to the Pharaoh's daughter's house, and more than likely, honestly, from historical perspective, for those years she was there, Jochebed was probably not with Amram for that period of time. She would have been brought into Pharaoh's house. He was raised, because we also learned he was raised as an Egyptian. And so she's a nanny within, and which makes her faith even more remarkable. What she is doing is she is actually teaching him inside enemy lines, if you will. That doesn't mean she's not telling him who Amram is. I believe she is, and I think that Moses knows that. But she is the primary teacher here because Amram would not have been allowed to be near her. He wasn't in that capacity that she was in.
Do you think Pharaoh's daughter was the target?
No. I think that they literally just, from their perspective, they just floated her down the river.
Yeah.
And
So into the heart of the beast. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty miraculous.
But Jochebed becomes a slave or a servant within Pharaoh's house during this time, is what I'm saying.
And could have been killed for teaching the Hebrew way inside of the palace, for sure.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that there's never an opportunity, but we've got to, and I do think that's one of the parallels, by the way, we'll talk about Wednesday night, is both with Moses and Jesus, the mothers take on a very much of a primary parenting role within the story. Now, that doesn't mean Joseph's not around, because Jesus is described as the son of Joseph. But it just means that we do see the mothers taking on a really important role in the storytelling scripturally.
Just one quick point, hopefully, is that in all these stories throughout Hebrews, God doesn't reveal with absolute clarity the end goal.
Yeah.
Every one of these people move moment by moment with faith. And we get to see more of Abraham, the moments go down, the moments come up, but each of us kind of fall in that same category. We can't see the promised land. We have descriptions that give us little bits, but we still can't see it. So we just have to move moment by moment with faith, and that's how all of them in Hebrews 11 connect. It's a moment by moment walk that can't fully see the end, but trust God's end.
And that's such a struggle for most of us, right? We
Well,
want to see the big picture. We want to know the ending. We want to know how it all plays out. But that's where faith
Even
comes
the
in.
non-analytical among us, they want to know. They want to see the full.
And by the way, I do realize that in the story, part of what it says is take the child away and raise him, and she brings him back. I get that. The likelihood, again, in this culture, just from a cultural standpoint, is that would have happened in Pharaoh's house. And that's the hard thing for us. The language kind of is a little clunky there, but from what we can tell, that would have happened where she could still keep an eye on him. That doesn't mean that Amram didn't meet him in the market or out in the park or whatever you want to say. I mean, we don't know about all that, but we know just what we do know is, and I do agree with Brandon, Amram's not disappeared. He's not dead. He's not gone.
It's not a deadbeat dad.
He's
around.
Not a deadbeat dad. But Jochebed is the one who makes all this happen in the end. She's the one that is she's the conduit to make it all happen. Without her, that's not possible for him to even know who his father is. He would have been raised as a true orphan, not knowing his, and we know that he knows who he is, right? That's the other thing. We know when he sees the Hebrew man being killed, he knows he's a Hebrew.
Right.
He looks like an Egyptian when he goes to Midian, but he knows he's a child of Abraham. And that is because of his parents. And I think both of them deserve credit. I do it, and I just want to make sure I understand. I agree with Brandon. The father's not disappeared. It's just that Jochebed is a major character for a reason. She's the one that keeps it all together and makes it all happen. And again, that's similar to what we'll see with Mary, because what does Mary do? Mary's the one that's always there. Mary's the one that's taking note of things. Mary's the one that's keeping things in her heart, knowing what's going to... and so that's important as well.
That's the natural
Yeah.
role of a mama in,
It is.
in Scripture, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're to lead the family at home.
Yeah.
You know, and that's normal.
And I think one of the things that's happening here is, for as much as people may look at the Bible as being misogynistic, I just want to make sure we see these points in these stories where God is really lifting women up as true heroes of the story, and in showing their value and their importance, and showing that they have great contributions to the stories and to the plan of redemption. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the word basket can be translated box or coffin. And I think that was a good word play that was included here. That essentially what you see is they're floating, I mean, I hate to use this terminology, but they're floating Moses in his coffin down the river.
And I mean, you can point out, I mean, the only other place this showed up is in, the only time this word is used is in Noah and the ark, and the deliverance through water.
Two stories.
Two stories that use this word.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're floating boxes. The best translation for these words, which wouldn't make sense to us, is box, right? The word ark is just a box, and that again, when you think about the Ark of the Covenant, I've said this a lot, but as a child, I never could understand why the Ark of the Covenant and Noah's Ark, one's a boat, one's this container, this ornate container, but they're both just boxes. That's all really it is. Ark is not really a boat. It's just a floating box. That's you know, in those stories. So again, there's something to think about there. I think one of the things really to think about throughout the story is this is just another one of those stories where God just really works in mysterious ways. And we only have about 6 minutes left, so we're not going to read this. But you know, here in this story, they float him down the river. Miriam follows after him. And it's almost like they don't know. And Miriam's kind of like the spy who's just to say, hey, here's what happened. He got swallowed by a catfish, or I don't know. You know, he's just that we have that kind of lookout, and what she sees is, and it does seem to be presented as almost this happenstance. Hey, they float down the river, and then all of a sudden, here's this group of women come down to the river, and Pharaoh's daughter's there. Now, I have heard it suggested that it was likely that there was a time during the day people would bathe. And it may be that she intentionally floated Moses down the river at a time that more women would be bathing. And the chances of a woman having compassion on this child in a basket that's been abandoned are greater, let's admit that and acknowledge that, than some guy who may have been enlisted in Pharaoh's army and sees it as a Hebrew child and just turns the basket over. So there might have been some wisdom and strategy in that. I think that's one of the things to consider.
Let me ask, because I mean, you said you didn't want to spend long, but she put the child she placed it among the reeds by the riverbank, and his sister stood at a distance. So I almost interpret this as there wasn't a lot of floating, that this was sat in a specific spot.
Could be. I mean, at the same time.
So maybe there was some pre-planning. Like I'm skeptical. I read it as pre-planning, that they said it here. No, but I read it as they didn't just push it out to see where it went, that they placed it here knowing that this was perhaps a bathing spot.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
That it's probably, because also if you're bathing in the Nile, y'all saw the Nile, and I lived on the Mississippi for 11 years, or real close. I wouldn't drink from the Mississippi or bathe in it.
The guy realized after he drank the cup of coffee
Yeah.
that it came from the river. I was like, oh.
That was the funniest part. I lived with Jared, and I was like, you would drink that, would you? He goes, no. I was like, yeah, because the health inspector has never been there. And then you find out he's just scooping up water from the Nile. Jared's really out at that point. But more than likely, there would be coves or little inlets or areas that they could bathe. Because the other thing is, guys living on the Mississippi, there are stories all the time. People fall off into the Mississippi. The current in a river that size is super strong. I mean, it is wildly strong. So the idea that you figured out a place you can bathe means there's not a lot of current, right?
Gators.
Yeah. So there's no gators there. There would be crocodiles.
Crocodiles.
Yeah. So, but again, this story is just it's wildly unique in this sense. Do I think that it probably is they're hoping? Yeah, I think obviously they're hoping that a woman comes to bathe and will take him. And that is what happens, because what we see is that Pharaoh's daughter raises them. And he's raised so Egyptian that when he's 40 years old, he looks Egyptian. I mean, he comes to Midian, he defends a shepherd's daughter, and he looks Egyptian. They assume he's an Egyptian. He's dressed like an Egyptian. He talks like an Egyptian. So all of that is important. He walks like an Egyptian. Joe is waiting for the Bengals reference. There it is. Oh, yeah.
That was David.
Was it David? Yeah. You're all children of the 80s in here. But then, like the name Moses, I thought this was really interesting that in the Hebrew, and we always emphasize the Hebrew where it means to draw out, and it really it points out in the book, it's not one drawn out of, but it's really that Moses is the one who draws out. It's an active voice of the usage. So it's kind of prophetic, its meaning. He's going to draw them out of Egypt. And yes, there is this drawn out of water, but more importantly, he's going to draw them out of Egypt. But in the Egyptian, it probably means the son of no one. And it probably is just this idea of being an orphan. Here's this abandoned child. And a lot of their names were son of a god, and this is the son of no god. This is the son of nobody. In that sense, it's kind of like the Barabbas of Jesus' story, right? Just the son of, except he's the son of his father, and here it's just the son of no father, and the way that it's presented. And it's interesting, this quote, we won't read Isaiah 60, but this quote really stuck out by Michael Heiser. I like a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of things Michael Heiser says are pretty good. He's one of the contributors to the Bible Project, so you've heard some of his thoughts before. But Moses was born out of nothing, found his way through privilege back to nothing. And that's a really powerful statement when you think about it. That was one that got highlighted in the book when I read that and thought about that. And so what we see, and what is it, I mean, and I think one of the things to think about is it's also back to our very first class when we talked about we want to make these guys into heroes. We want to make them a hero of the story, and ultimately they're not the hero of the story. God's the hero of the story. And Moses is another, even with this quote I thought about this, Moses is another great example of that, because Moses comes from being the son of nobody. And he flees because of this idea that he'll be charged with murder and an avenger. And he flees and he goes away for 40 years and lives as a shepherd in a strange land. And then he comes back and he leads his people out only to not get to enter the land because of the consequence of his own actions. And what an amazing story to think of, all of which is Moses is like the most predominant figure in the Old Testament when you think about it. And he goes on a mission that he doesn't get to enjoy. And it's almost as if it's intentional to make sure we remember this is God's story. Like even Moses' story is God's story. And what's ironic is, why did Moses ultimately not go into the promised land?
Disobedient.
Because ultimately the way he disobeyed God, I think, is that he forgot it was God's story. If you go back and read what he does, it's not just that he didn't do what God said, but in the process he says, must I bring you water out of this rock? Look at what I have to do. And he forgot God in that moment. And I think that's valuable to, we'll end there. We're out of time. We'll pick up when he goes to Midian on Wednesday night. Thank you.